Welcome to the Children and Family Services Training Center's webinar on foster care confidentiality. This webinar was originally recorded on February 23, 2018. The presenter for today's webinar is Kelsey Bless. Bless is currently the North Dakota Permanency Administrator employed by the North Dakota Department of Human Services within the Children and Family Services Division. In 2010, Bless was hired as the Chaffee Independent Living and Licensing Administrator responsible for the oversight of statewide programming specific to foster youth in transition and residential facility licensing. In March of 2015, Bless accepted the permanency position and is the Supervisor of Foster Care Eligibility. Bless's primary job responsibilities include the oversight of foster care law, rule, and policy writing, as well as provider payments, shelter care, respite care, and recruitment and retention services in North Dakota. Bless received her undergraduate and master's degrees in social work from the University of North Dakota. She was raised in Manville, North Dakota, and moved to Bismarck back in 2008. Bless and her husband Eric have 3 daughters. In regards to credit for this webinar, we ask that you talk with your licensing worker to obtain the 1-hour CEU. There will be no certificate of completion at the end of this training. If you have further questions, please reach out to us at the Children and Family Services Training Center. With that said, we ask that you now give your full attention to Kelsey Bless.
Well, thank you everybody, and thanks for tuning in tonight for a webinar on confidentiality. I'm going to be specifically talking about foster care, and many of you are foster parents, but I do know that we have some foster care members who are joining us as well, and so really wanting to make this as diverse of a presentation as possible, but also relatively focused on the confidentiality of the children that we work with and their families. I'm going to go ahead and speak as loudly as I possibly can to ensure that you all can hear me. But I'm Kelsey Bless. I'm the Permanency Administrator for Children and Family Services with the Department of Human Services. And I have been with the department for 8 years. I started as the Chaffee Independent Living and Licensing Administrator. So I worked with youth in transition and the Chaffee Independent Living contract. And I also was able to then license the residential child care facilities across the state. About 4 years ago, I transitioned into a new role here within the department, and I now oversee the federal law, the state law, and state policy as it relates to foster care. So I work with the foster care administrator, Dean Stern, very closely, and we are able to execute a lot of that work that is the foundation to what the really difficult work is, which is your job and being able to care for and work with the children. So the training tonight is confidentiality, say what, and trying to have some of the presentation, some of the emojis and different pictures will move, and they'll try to keep you entertained as we sit here tonight for an hour to really learn about confidentiality. But confidentiality is a topic that I think many of us are truly informed on. We understand what confidentiality is. It's something that even though folks may belabor the conversation and talk about it at great length, it's one of the areas of our work and of our days that tends to be the most challenging. And so it's important reminders that we're going to go through tonight about really protecting the privacy of the young people and their families that we work with within the child welfare system. If you were to share information with one person, you know, that telephone effect of you tell one person, they'll tell 3, those 3 tell 3 more, and news travels fast. And we are a small state, and many of our communities, we know each other and we know a lot about what's going on. So it's important that we try to protect the young people and their families and their stories to the best of our abilities. And the other challenges that we have in today's society is how quick we are to engage in social media and being able to have all these outlets available to us at the tip of the fingers and being able to really have opportunities that could be some ways not always appropriate when we have foster children in our placement. So this presentation is going to provide you with the overview of the state law, the rules, and the policies as it's specific to children in foster care. And this little gal, she reminds me a lot of what my household looks like. I'm a mom of 3 young girls, and that's sort of an expression that I think many little ones will say, but the reason we labeled the training confidentiality say what? Because it's sort of trendy, it's new, it's modern, and I think that oftentimes people reflect with expression and emotion when they hear things that might be alarming or surprising to them as well. So I'm going to briefly go through the laws and the rules and the policy. In my day-to-day work, this all kind of lays itself out as federal law is the foundation to how we engage with young people in our child welfare system. Federal regulations are there for a reason. North Dakota as a state is required to be in full compliance. So we have standards that we have to enforce at various levels. So we hear from our federal partners and things happen in Washington, and then we here in North Dakota get those. And we take it to the next step, which would be localizing the federal regulation. And we create state laws. When those state laws are created, and many of you know the legislative process is every 2 years, so when there's a new federal regulation, many times we are down on the floor working with our legislators, really educating and informing on new policy and practice that needs to incur. In order for us to get the policy, we need to have the statute in place in the state. So we have state laws that get put into place, and then we create state rules. And so many of you are familiar with the North Dakota Administrative Code. And for foster parents, we'll talk a little bit what those numbers are. But the administrative rule then leads us into the policy. And the policy helps to drive some of the practice. And I talk about the federal law really being the foundation for this work, but we do know that it's really interesting how we talk about laws and we talk about rules and we talk about policy, but at the end of the day, this is really about children and families. This is about supporting young people. It's about supporting families and hoping that we can get the best permanency plan for that family and their case plan. So together, they can move forward with our custodial agents to have the most success. And all of you listening in on this call have a very valuable part to that piece of the puzzle. And this triangular hierarchy includes all of us at various stages. We've had foster parents, we've had case managers come and testify during legislative session to really encourage policy changes that may need to, law changes that may need to impact policy in the way that we work. So there's many kinds of confidentiality, and I'm not going to detail all of this information tonight in the presentation. There's just not enough time to talk about the varying levels of confidentiality, but I think the gist of it, specifically as we talk and focus on foster care, is really what is the information that is private and needs to be protected, and the details that can and cannot be shared on behalf of the young people that we have in our homes when we care for them. I'm not going to read the laws word for word. You all will have those citations, and the presentation will be available. This PowerPoint is being recorded and will be on the UND website for future reference as well. And many of these laws you could just Google, and we would be able to locate and identify them online as well. So they're pretty readily available for North Dakota Century Code. The first point that I want to make on this slide is North Dakota Century Code 5011 talks about the records that we have and what it can and cannot be disclosed. And it references facilities. And I thought it was important for foster parents to understand that you are considered a facility in the eyes of the law. And the facility is inclusive of family foster homes, of the residential child care facilities, and group homes as well. So it's inclusive of various levels, and wanting to ensure that you understand that the records of you as a licensed foster parent are also confidential. And we do have opportunities where people will contact us and ask for open records. And if that happens, we do have reasons to if there's a definite interest or the well-being or concern that we would need to disclose information, we would, but there's certain information that we will not disclose. And the law really protects the Department of Human Services and your information as a licensed provider as well. But any of that information, any of those records that are obtained from the custodial agency that you're working with on behalf of the child, and you might have med logs at your house that you're tracking their medication management. You may have child and family team meeting notes. You might have a file that you're kind of operating out of all of their medical appointments or therapies or trying to keep a schedule together. And that information is confidential to that child, and that's information that is specific to their case. So if that child were to leave your home, then you would either turn that into the agency and they could utilize it or shred it, or it would need to be shred. And so working with your case manager closely to understand information that is confidential, and if the information needs to be utilized, there's reasons for it. And on here it talks about if an officer of the law were to need that information for a criminal investigation, if there was judicial proceedings that would require information from you or from information that you may have in your documentation, if this did go to a judicial proceeding, and then also if there is definite interest from another party and there was reason for that information to be shared. The confidential information contained in records, this one really, I'm not going to go into great detail of it because it does talk about how the department's confidentiality and when we can disclose information as well. And we oversee the programs. We have the counties working with us as our authorized agents. So we have the authority to then ask for information that we might need for our data management system and for federal reporting requirements. But as a vendor or an agent or a contract of the department, which a licensed provider would fall into this, you must agree to maintain confidentiality. And all of you who have become licensed foster parents, as you go through the home study process and you're signing the applications and you're abiding by the confidentiality rules and indicating that you understand the rules, laws, and policies in North Dakota, you're giving a thumbs up that you totally understand what confidentiality is and that you will withhold or not deliver and disclose information that you are not allowed to do. And it really, the language of the law talks a lot about services, and the services being, in this case, children who are receiving foster care services through a local public agency. In North Dakota, the public agencies that we have immediate direct contact with will be any of the county social service offices who would receive custody of a child. We also work closely with the Division of Juvenile Services because some of our youth come through as DJS custodial young people. And then the tribes, we work in agreement with 4 tribes in North Dakota, and all of the tribes would also have access to being a custodial agent to a child that they have received custody of in their jurisdiction. Lastly, the Department of Human Services is also a custodian. We are a custodian for children who have a termination of parental rights. And so the foster care case management is still done locally at the county in which this case was transitioned from custody. The case management doesn't end. The county is still the authorized agent of the department, and they're really doing the hard work on the ground, closely with the cases, closely with the families, and closely with you to ensure that we can achieve permanency for these young people. This is a section of the law that talks about individually identifiable information. And this is where if an individual were to need to have specific information, the law allows for certain information to be disclosed and then other information that cannot be disclosed. So it goes back to my point earlier about not being able to release social security numbers and so forth. Authorized staff in the department, we go out and do file reviews, so this allows for access to all of that information. And so in the event that we were doing file reviews as more of an auditing or monitoring of compliance process, we oftentimes are looking also at foster parent files that might be locally maintained in the agency, the county, or even Path of North Dakota as one of our licensing agencies as well. And just as a reminder, and they restate this often in our state law, that unless it's otherwise specifically noted, information is confidential. If the report is made in good faith and may be disclosed to authorized staff of the department, so if something happens where information does need to be disclosed, you can work with the county directly, and you're not breaching confidentiality when you speak to the custodial agent. And then any person who is subject of a report. So let's say that a 960 is filed. That subject of that 960 can be notified, but what they cannot be told is who filed the report on them. And so as we work with families who come into foster care, they typically have come through because of a child abuse and neglect report, and they may know who filed that report, but they don't always know, and the county is not allowed to tell them. And so if you are the provider and you're filing a 960 because something has been disclosed or you hear of it, your identity will not be disclosed either. So it's a nice protection to know that that confidentiality is there for your protection as well. Public officials who might need information can have that, the courts, and then also institutional review boards. So sometimes research studies are done, and there's opportunities for releases of information to be had as well. But at the end of the day, the most, first and foremost, is that individuals who disclose or authorize or knowingly permit, participate in or disclose confidential information on behalf of children that are in your placement or in the care or custody of your agency can be subject to penalty. And I don't know statistics of research that has shown how many foster parents have had issues with confidentiality. I'm not going to say it hasn't happened, because there have been issues with breaching of confidentiality, and we've had to address that, even from Children and Family Services and working with our local counties and in our regions. So we want to ensure that the information of the young people is protected. And Judge Judy always has her famous line of "zip it," and so it's interesting, had to throw her on there as we talk about being subject to penalty. The penalties for breaching confidentiality is a Class A misdemeanor in the state of North Dakota. Now, depending on which court of law this would have been heard in, or if the penalty were to rise to that level, it is my understanding that Class A misdemeanors can be up to a year in jail and or $2,000 penalties. So some people, it's just a really good reminder to know that there is a penalty for it, and our law enforces that. The North Dakota Administrative Code is the second tier to that. So we had our state law is what North Dakota then goes forward with, and then we then develop North Dakota Administrative Code, which we often refer to as rule. And we have the rule cited there that says all information given to foster parents by the supervising agency, which would be, in this case, the language of that would be the custodial agency, who is placing that child into your home, who's responsible as the primary case manager for that child. So any of their information of the child's family must remain confidential and may not be disclosed to any person without prior approval. So when in doubt, we want to make sure that we are checking with the case managers about what information needs to be sent out there. I thought this slide was really critical about confidentiality, because many foster parents have adult children. They have adult children living in their home. They have other children who live in their home and maybe are the same age as the foster child who's also living in their home. And so those children may go to school together. They may be friends. They may have similar friends at school. And your family members may inadvertently hear a lot of extra things about that individual's life situation that could pose risk to information being leaked. And I would say that any young person who was saying something maybe flippantly to a friend at school wouldn't always be doing that to be hurtful. I think the unfortunate reality to how we live life is people do a lot of talking. And we need to just really teach our families, teach our children who are in the home, that being a foster parent and having foster children in our home is really a privilege, and you are opening up your heart and you're opening up your home to help serve these young people, and it's their story to share, and we want to really enforce that. And we can use words like that, and it seems to be that children, that resonates well with them, and they hear that. And I think if you're opening your heart and your home, the children in your home and or your adult children have a real soft heart and have that awareness as well. So I think it's pretty easy as a teachable moment, but we just need to be careful. So this is a slide about sharing information and breaching confidentiality, and it goes into the needing to know basis and making sure that we're sharing information that is important with the right people. But if you're not sure about the information that is going out there, if you're not sure about, somebody asks you a question and you're not exactly sure how to answer it, or maybe really it's just on the tip of your tongue and you've had a tough day and you feel like if you could just tell somebody what it is that you are dealing with this child, or how sad you are about something that happened to that child, or maybe it's a frustration. If you don't have a spouse that's available in the home, or maybe there's not another adult who's familiar with the case, if you're not sure if you should say it, it's a pretty good sign you shouldn't. And if you need to check in with the foster care case manager and just have a debriefing, or maybe there's a foster parent association locally in your area or a support group, but that would be an opportunity to have those discussions that are more protected and not specific to a child and their name and their exact circumstance. And it's really something that I say quite a bit, is that sharing information that is not yours is not okay. And it's someone else's story, and so we need to be careful about sharing other people's stories. So foster children, they have rights, and their situation is their story. So you may have a child who comes into placement in your home, and they are very willing to tell everybody everything about why they are in placement. And I think those are good teachable moments to really work with young people about appropriate personal disclosure, about when it's appropriate to talk about your story. Once you tell somebody something, you can't take that back. And so you don't know what that person is going to do with that information. And so using that as a guide in working with some of our young people who feel in this society, and we'll get to social media in a little bit, about how easy it is to just say something or put it out there for others to read and see and do and have interpretations or assumptions about. And if we do disclose personal information to a friend or a family member of one of ours, that child needs to understand, yes, there's likely going to be 100% support, but there's also risk in how detailed they go with information they are choosing to share with other people. So this has come up a number of times where we will have a foster parent ask, what if a child discloses some personal information to me and they feel comfortable in my home now and they're more willing to speak freely, and how do I handle a situation where that child tells me something in total confidence? Well, the answer that we will always give, and custodial case managers would be saying the same thing on the front line, that if it's a safety concern or it could maybe jeopardize the current visitation schedule that the child has, or even possibly require some extra safety planning, or maybe there's an improper or inappropriate friendship that's taking place at school, those are things that we need to talk about and we need to repeat and we need to tell someone. As foster parents, you're mandated reporters. So you are required to report things. And I have the skeletons in the closet situation because many people have a skeleton in their closet. And the unfortunate reality for foster youth is they have a lot of stories in that closet. And not all of them have been released. And not all of them have been shared. And that's for them to have that moment of strength to be able to have those conversations. But if we have a situation where a child has been hurt, we need to be able to we are mandated to tell the county and file a 960, and we can't keep those secrets. If it's in the child's best interest, we need to notify that agency so that they can do proper case planning and provide the treatment necessary to meet the needs of our children. So this is just a good reminder of the things that we've heard a million times, that what you say will stay here unless. And we've learned this in school for any of you who are social workers or others that have sociology or psychology. This is information that is critical to how we do business. For those of you in foster care, you've heard this before too as foster parents, that you know what you tell me is safe. I'm a safe person to tell that information to. However, if someone's hurting you, I want to get you help. If you want to hurt somebody or hurt yourself, I want to make sure that you are protected. And that's what I'm here for. I'm your buffer to ensure safety. We did create a foster parent handbook. The training center and some of the regional supervisors across the state assisted me in doing that, and I think we came up with a pretty great product. Many of you have received a hard copy of that last year. It was your 2017 Happy New Year's gift. And for those of you who are new foster parents, you may or may not have received a hard copy, but there are some that are still lingering out there across the state. So ensure if you would like a hard copy of it to ask your licensing worker and or the foster care case manager for a copy of it. And if we're running low on copies, we'll have to consider making a new one. We do have it online, and I encourage you to look at the PDF that's listed in the publication section on the ND.gov website, because it does offer a great plethora of information, and confidentiality is addressed in there as well. And it's really colorful, super fun to watch. Okay, so as we're finalizing this whole front end of the confidentiality business, we want to ensure that we're reminded that you're entrusted with this confidential information about the children that come into your home. And it's not just about the child, because oftentimes they're there because of their families and their parents and their siblings. And again, it's not our story to tell, and they have the right to understand that their information is private, and that it's respected by not only you as a foster parent, but as their agency who is working hand in hand with their case planning. I got a kick out of this little screen because I think it's important that we remember it's the casual conversations that sometimes can get us into trouble. Many of your family and many of your friends know that you are a foster parent. They know that you are giving of your time and providing this extra community service and giving back to your community to open your heart and hands. It's important that these casual conversations don't lead to detailed information, even if it's disguised, because you can sugarcoat it, you can try to cover it up, you can say it's John Doe, but oftentimes your family and friends are going to know who it is that you're talking about. And once you deliver detailed information about that child's case or their situation or their needs, you are breaching confidentiality. And so we just want to ensure that we remind ourselves it's very easy to get put in a situation like this. And we just need to remind ourselves that it's okay to say, if someone asks, how are things going with Johnny, that you are able to say, we're making it, or thank you for asking, and trying to rebuttal those conversations without going into detail. Information that they may genuinely, as North Dakota nice, they may genuinely want to be able to provide you support and help and assistance. And I think that's lovely as friendships go, and they can do that for you without having to be delivered great detail on behalf of what mom is doing, what dad or mom is not doing, what the child needs for any of their therapies, or how they're struggling with bedwetting, or those details become very specific to the child that you're caring for. So it's just a reminder to be careful in those very casual conversations. Now, the release of information, many of you have signed those. You've had them signed for you so that you can have conversations with the school. And as a large majority of our children are in public school systems, then we're able to work closely with the teachers and maybe a school counselor. But also, as you are needing to have respite care, or substitute care, for being able to provide a little bit of information to the person who is going to be providing substitute care. If you're going on a trip to Mexico and another foster parent is supporting your effort, they need to know a little bit about what's going on. And the foster care case manager would be a primary individual to do that. But if you're dropping that child off and getting them settled into the other foster home, which may happen, we want to ensure that we have the proper information in place and the details required for them to best care for that child in your absence. So we're going to shift gears from the extreme confidentiality and the rules, the policies, and the law, and we're going to talk about social media for a little bit. Excuse me. So social media and our modern technology, we have so much opportunity today, and it's right at our fingertips. And we can say things, we can do things, we can see things that we never could see before. So being a foster parent, for those of you who are tuning in and you've been a foster parent for 10 or 15 years, maybe even 20, because I know you're out there, it's amazing how the landscape of being able to engage with technology as you're sitting listening in to this presentation tonight from your home is such an opportunity of great success, but also of extreme challenge. Because many of you probably want to ask questions, and I know that the UND Training Center is offering that you can type those questions to her, and if there's not time, because of the large volume of participants in this presentation, to do those questions, that we could get back with a Q&A document that supports this this particular presentation. But we have media right at our fingertips. We have social media opportunities that really are endless, and they're changing every day. So with modern technology and in the world of immediate gratification and also seeing new gadgets and grabbing the newest iPhone and having all of some of us who maybe talk to Siri and get lots of information about tell me what the weather is, that modern technology is something that many of us access and something that many of our young people want and that their families are using. So even if they may not have a landline telephone, they may have a cell phone. And if that cell phone is not a monthly case plan, like a plan that they're paying for monthly, they're going to have a cell phone that's going to allow them minutes, or at least if they have wireless access, that they can have Facebook, because Facebook is free. Facebook allows us the opportunity to talk to people as long as we have wireless internet. And if they have a few minutes, they'll be able to text and be able to call. So there's a lot of things that are done different today in how we engage and communicate with people. And I think that that's one of the positives to how our modern technology is to be embraced, and that it's easy to stay connected to people. It's easy to flip through and look at pictures or send someone a text message. Even if you don't want a full-blown conversation, you can still check in and say hello without the full-blown half-hour call that we used to have from our phones that were connected to the wall. So the cons and the challenges to this is that technology can be problematic. Some of you may not be hearing this presentation every minute. You may not be seeing my face, even though the idea of technology was to allow for that in this presentation. Technology also withdraws some of the personal aspects to human conversation, and it turns some of our life into not so private situations. And it's really critical that we remember what goes online stays online forever. Even if we go to remove it, if we go to delete it, if we take it off, we have no control over the cyber puppetry that goes behind the scenes to capture and keep and retain information that all of us across the nation are entering onto the internet any given moment of any given day. And I post this picture of a young girl because I think it's in a critical stage where, again, those teachable moments and those conversations with youth in our home really become problematic when we think about social media and information that we divulge or we expose ourselves in ways that make us very vulnerable. And it's not often that young people remember or recognize that they too could put themselves in a very complicated situation. And one of them could be, or maybe possibly be, quite an emotional response to putting something out there and having backlash, putting a photo out there that gets shared, or sending someone a text message and then that photo is shared amongst an entire high school. Those are very unforgettable moments for someone who's made a horrible mistake. And once it goes, it's gone, and you can't bring it back. So I show Facebook because I think that's the primary. We also have Twitter, which is also a new way everyone's tweeting about something. And tweeting is a little bit less aggressive unless you're specifying names and such. But Facebook offers some good topics for conversation because I think it's easy. A lot of people are on it. We have it on our phone, so we're connecting right away to upload the newest, hottest thing that just happened in our life. And we are treating our foster children like we treat our own children. So when we're all at the ice cream shop, we're snapping photos about how much fun it was that we went to Cherryberry. And those situations can pose risk. And so we're going to talk a little bit about the varieties across the state and where we stand. Now, social media has some good things, and there's a lot of likes. The social ties and the family connections, just the support in general of having individuals who will reach out to you and be part of your life. There's support groups, there's awareness, there's all kinds of articles and such that go on there, and then really an opportunity for self-expression and being able to share who it is that we are. The not so great things and the challenges come with our privacy and the privacy concerns. Even at the highest privacy setting, what you send out could be shared by anybody that you send it to, or who sees it, or who is access to being one of your friends. The safety behind it, I say safety with the premise mostly of your location, because if an agency says to you, you know, it's fine, just don't say that they're in foster care, you cannot disclose their identity of being a foster youth, and just keep their name off of it. If you go to Cherryberry and you snap a picture and all, 6 of you are in the photo, and 4 of them are your children and 2 of them are the foster siblings, just don't say. I mean, they could be their friends. There's a lot of assumption that goes out there. There might be some more flexibility with some counties than others, and some agencies than others. And that's right, wrong, or indifferent. As the custodians, they have the opportunity to make those policies specific to how it is that they want to execute their business, and they want to protect the rights of their children. Now, from my level, from the situation of looking at it more globally, I think that the example of we are not allowed to disclose the identity that this child is in foster care is first and foremost. That we're not going to say, oh, this is Johnny, he's my new foster son. We don't need to say that. It's a label. It's an unnecessary identification of the child. And most of the time, people are going to make assumptions without asking the question, knowing that you are a foster parent. So cyber, the other difficulties and challenges outside of safety and location, and I want to just highlight, sorry, with that, again, oftentimes the biological families who are working with you may be trying to find you or locate where their child might be. And if they see pictures and the location on your GPS of your phone where you take that picture is on, then you're posing risk to the safety of not only yourself, but of the child. Breaking rules, inappropriate communications, but also that there's typically no filter, and people are very free to share whatever it is they choose to share as they're approaching social media. So we want to stay safe. We want to make sure that our privacy settings limit who can see any of our posts. So if you don't, and there's a slide that's coming up that if you're not aware of how to set the privacy settings on any of your social media accounts, that you can easily locate those by doing a question and answer on Google. But I also have links on here because it's super important that we are recognizing the privacy settings that need to be done. And then nothing online is truly private. So we need to remember that and keep in mind that information before we post something. So think before you post. The GPS and the location there, again, families, they love their children. They want to know that their children are okay. And if they know that you are their foster parent and you don't have privacy settings, then they would be allowed to search for every Sally Smith who is in the nation and would locate you based off of North Dakota and would be able to follow you without you knowing. So it's important that for our own safety that we have conversations, and some people may have very open communication and information with their families. And there's some wonderful aspects to that because it's critical, and we'll talk about photography in a little bit, so I'll just get there. As we stay safe, we want to not give out personal information. Another safety measure for any of our social media sites is online gaming, that they are asking, identifying information, and it's critical that we're not engaging in online gaming that doesn't have protections in place. If we are going to be on social media, that we show respect and that we have kindness and that we are only friending people that we know. And some of these safety measures can be relayed to older adolescents you may have in your care who want this opportunity, but that we aren't putting ourselves in a position to meet people who say that they are somebody online. And that could be a relative who finds you and says, I recognize that you have my grandson in your foster home. I would love to meet up with you. I would love to see my grandson. Can you meet me at Starbucks tomorrow morning? Those are really critical safety concerns that need to be addressed with the case manager immediately. This is an example similar to that of the grandmother who might send you an instant message. They might send you a message on Facebook that says, I hear you're a foster parent. I would encourage you not to respond to those conversations. And if they continue, there's a way to block people from your Facebook account, because the minute that you say, yes, I'm a foster parent to Johnny, you have breached confidentiality and shared identifying information on behalf of the youth in your home. So let's say you're a foster parent and you are on Facebook. You need to ensure that you're speaking to the foster care case manager and the licensing worker about the policies that they have in place. Because if you're in one part of the state, it might be different if you were to move to another portion of the state. The underlying, overarching, be-all, end-all of confidentiality is you are not to disclose the identity of the foster youth and not to disclose that they are in foster care. But there may be additional policies locally, and you need to ensure that you're following those. Also, if you do receive permission to go on Facebook, you want to make sure that you have permission from the young people, especially those who are old enough to know that the photos are being taken and posted. And we want to protect the privacy, we want to protect confidentiality, and we want to think before we post. I talked a little bit about support on Facebook, and I think it's important that we remember that support groups, they're everywhere. And there's a lot of foster parent Facebook pages. They are protected, they're separate, but it doesn't mean that information on there isn't shared. And for as private as they try to make them, it's really important that when we use those as a chat function, that we're not disclosing confidential information. And speaking in general terms is one thing, but indicating details of my 8-year-old boy, Tommy, who is currently experiencing is information that we really cannot be sharing in such a large platform. And so there are other ways to do that, and face-to-face is definitely more protected than an online chat. You don't know who it is that you're talking to in an online chat. And once you post it into a framework, such as a Facebook support page, you are opening up that conversation because it's attached to your name, it's attached to who you are, and it says that you wrote this. And so we want to ensure the protections for the individual that may be the subject of the conversation, but also the protections for you. And I would encourage mentoring a lot. So encourage you to find another foster parent you can mentor or be mentored by. I want to talk a little bit about normalcy. We had a lot of tasks in 2015. The normalcy effects and what we want to offer young people in foster care do not supersede the laws, rules, and policies that are in place for various underlying reasons, but confidentiality does surface when it comes up to normalcy. But normalcy is saying that a child should be given opportunities to engage in typical growth and development and activities. And so many foster parents do an awesome job of this. But normalcy I wanted to talk about as we think about confidentiality in social media, because young people want to do this. All the other kids are doing it. How come I can't do it? It's the regular thing. It's the norm. Everyone's doing it. So they may be asking to also participate in functions such as Facebook. And so you're going to want to ensure that you're working with the case manager to know that the team is on board with this individual getting an account. that you have reviewed the safety for social media, that you've helped to ensure privacy settings are structured for this young person. You're going to want to go through the basic safety precautions that you've done for yourself and really discuss the information that they are putting out there and that they don't have to disclose specific information about their situation. There's the link for the Facebook settings and also Instagram, Snapchat, and other networks. And you could Google any one of those and it would provide you with privacy settings. I want to talk a little bit about pictures. And foster children, they can appear in pictures. And there's some foster parents who do an amazing job of documenting the time that that child is in their home. And they take those photos and they give them to the biological family. And when that child has reunification, they're giving the photo of the first tooth that was lost. Or maybe it was the first time that this child went to school. And if mom and dad missed that opportunity because of their life situation, and you documented that for them, it's one of the best gifts that you can possibly give them. And so taking pictures of foster youth is absolutely okay. It's how we use those pictures and what we say about those pictures. And so I've gotten calls from school districts, I've gotten calls from agencies, I've gotten calls from foster parents who have asked, can the child be in the yearbook? Can the child be in the classroom photo? Can the child be in the Girl Scout photo? Absolutely. What cannot happen and what needs to be strictly emphasized is that we cannot say Mary Smith is a foster child. We cannot identify her as being in foster care. So I always use the sports metaphor because we have some young people who are amazing athletes, and it's important that they get to have that normalcy. They get to play basketball, they get to play soccer or football, whatever it may be. It might be an amazing glee club member, and we need to allow for those opportunities. But this is an example of the newspaper, and we can't always embrace what the media is going to say or do, but we can try to stay ahead of it and not allow for conversations to get bigger than what they need to. But Mary Smith kicking the Knights into state finals is definitely an appropriate headline for that soccer photo. What is not okay is that Mary Smith defeats the odds of foster care and she kicks the Knights into the state championship. So we want to ensure that we're being careful. Here's some examples of photos, and again, not relaying the identity. Those of you who are Blindside fans, this Merry Christmas from the Toonies, that is offered a lot of controversy in the film for those of you who have seen The Blind Side, because it was pretty obvious that they had taken in a child into their home. So I know that many of our agencies and I would agree that doing Christmas cards with photos does complicate measures, and it does lay it out there that there's some confidentiality concerns, even if you don't say that they're your foster child. So we want to be careful. The other example, you wouldn't know which of those children was in foster care, or that athlete catching the football is in foster care or is not. Photos are fun, but identities are private. And so all of these are pictures of information that may be disclosed or shared amongst our friends and family on social media, and they may be your child's friend. They may be your foster child, and we just can't say that they are in foster care. So I'm going to go into the last 10 minutes of this. I'm going to showcase a few questions excuse me, that may come up or that you may be thinking about. We're going to try to get ahead of some of that, and then just remember that the conversation and any questions that you may have that are not answered in tonight's presentation can be delivered to the training center, and we can try to do our Q&A response. So my family and friends know that I'm a foster parent. Is that breaking confidentiality? And the answer is no. You would be breaking the confidentiality if you were to disclose the details of the new placement. Why these two little siblings have been placed in your home. We take emergency placement. The children are treated like our own. They go to church, they go to activities, ball games, etc. Am I breaking confidentiality every time I have a new face with me? No. And the answer would be the same as previous. You would only be breaking the confidentiality if you were to tell all of your friends at the basketball game that you got these 3 new siblings in placement into your home because mom was abusing drugs. So we need to be very careful about the information that we detail about the children in our care. I typically have a full house. We attend many outings, and oftentimes people will say things like, wow, are all of these kids yours? And how many of you as foster parents can relate to this? I grew up in a house of 6 children, and my parents, they got that all the time. We were relatively close in age, and people just couldn't believe there would be 6 kids rolling through at the same time with my folks. So it was a very normal thing in my house, but for foster parents, it also becomes pretty real. Or, how old is your baby? Oh, she's so cute. So you can answer how old the baby is. You just don't need to say that this is my foster baby, and she's 8 months old, and she came to me from Minot. It's information that is unnecessary. I like this one because we have a lot of champions out there, a lot of individuals who are telling us, I want to talk about foster care. I'm a proud foster parent, and I want to give back to the community. I want to ask people to give back to the community. So I post a lot of articles on my Facebook page about becoming a foster parent, and I share stories with individuals online. Am I breaking and breaching confidentiality every time that I'm sharing information that I find available online? And the answer is no. You just want to be careful about the information you are sharing. And maybe you might be working with your local coalition, and you're the foster parent representative, and you just found out that the state of North Dakota has 1,550 youth in foster care, which, by the way, is a pretty accurate number for this moment in time. 1,550 youth. That's a lot of children. So as a foster parent, you're wanting to help recruit. You're wanting to help find placements that are more locally accessible to those families across the state. And it's okay to give brief and vague statistics, but you're not going to be able to say there's 1,500 youth in foster care, and I just took in 3 siblings, and they are adorable, and here are their names. And I know that this may seem very elementary, but it's such a solid reminder to how easy it is to share information when it's not intended to be shared. Okay, so as a foster parent, when that child leaves your home, you may have photos of them. And you're wondering what it is that you can do with those photos. Can you treat the photo that you have on your phone as a copy, like you would have printed it at Sam's Club or Snapfish and you would have had that copy at your home? Or maybe you did make a copy of it and you sent a copy with the child. You do not have to delete those photos, but you do need to have the same protections for those photos that you would as if the child was in your home, and that maybe you save them to a computer drive and you have a folder set aside. But if you were to donate your phone or recycle your phone or get rid of your computer, you do need to delete those photos because that's not information for other people to have. Pictures are taken of your whole family and you want to post that picture on Facebook. Included in the whole family is the foster youth, and you're not saying who any of the people are in the photo, you just want to put the picture out there. And again, we just want to be reminding ourselves that we're not detailing specific information, but we're also wanting to minimize the exposure. And that's for your safety as well. If I go back to those stories about the families who are on Facebook and are on social media sites constantly looking for photos of where their children might be placed. So are you allowed to have access to the password of the child, the foster youth Facebook page? And you are then going to be monitoring that to ensure that it's safe. And foster parents should be monitoring internet at any regard. So if they're doing homework after school and they're using the internet, they're using your home computer, you want to be monitoring, you want to be checking the history on that computer, you want to ensure that they're not coming across sites that would make them vulnerable, but also that they would come across maybe unintentionally and then they don't know how to talk to you about them. It is absolutely amazing the number of sites, and even on YouTube, how quickly a young person can come across something that is inappropriate and really does warrant a conversation. So same goes for social media sites. They might be posting something, or you might see somebody posting something on their site that is questionable, and you want to be able to help them learn how to navigate that. So it's okay if young people want to be on Facebook. There's There's nothing saying you absolutely cannot. And actually having a safe environment from a foster parent who's supervising them and really helping to provide those teachable moments is critical in how we can use these modern technologies that are placed upon us so quickly in the most appropriate way. But we want to talk about it with team meetings, and we want to know who's going to be responsible for that oversight. So this is an example of a foster youth who has their Facebook account, and they might say, my foster mom, Kelsey Bless, and they name me out, they call me out in their post. They've now just told everybody on Facebook that they are in foster care and that I am their foster mom, and my name is specified for anyone to have seen it. So the question is just asking, do I need to change my status, or can the relationship remain because the child disclosed it to themselves? And we really want to ensure that we're discouraging foster children from revealing their identity. And so again, it's one of those teachable moments in how we can provide the protections that they need. And sometimes you might have foster youth who come to you years later and they want to be your friend on Facebook because you really meant something to them and you were a large portion and part of their life. And once they're out of foster care and they're no longer in the custody of a public agency and they're making decisions on their own, that's a call that you would have to make depending on the relationship you have with that. But as professionals, you know, we are not allowed to be friends with our clients. And so it would be a similar situation about really setting up the boundaries to ensure that that we're being protective of ourselves, but also protecting the individual. So again, there's the highest security settings in this example as well. So what if the birth parents and the custodian say, no, the youth cannot have a Facebook page, but then they open one anyway because it's free and they can adjust the age and they can get on it, and our young people are very intelligent and it's easy access for anybody. Foster parents should really work with case managers to see how we should tackle that conversation and who should be the most appropriate in that moment. And because you're caring for that child, ding, 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 you're probably going to become the individual who is doing the most talking about it. But if we can include the biological family, especially if they were very strong willed and really had a strong perception about having them not join Facebook, then we would want to ensure that they could be part of that conversation. If they're saying, no, they shouldn't be on Facebook, they're probably pretty involved with that case, and we're nearing reunification and getting children back into that setting. I wanted to put this on there because we do have a number of foster parents who open their hearts and their homes to children in temporary need of foster care, but they also then extend that offer to children who are in need of adoption. So once that adoption happens and that finalization occurs, that story is now yours. And you can say and do whatever it is you feel you need to do to celebrate that opportunity. And I love this slide at the bottom, the photo of the young man. He indicates how many days he's in foster care, but today I am adopted. And it's just something that is really strong, and they celebrated that and they posted it on Facebook. These are just national photos, nothing specific to North Dakota, but just different ways people share their stories. So we're going to wrap it up right at a 2-minute mark. At the end of the day, it's important when we think about confidentiality that we are talking to our child's custodian and that we are having information and working with our licensing agency. Confidentiality is important that we protect that information because it's really not our story to tell. And if we are breaching confidentiality, it is a violation of our license, and we need to know that in advance, that only information we have the right to release is what we can share. We need to think before we post, and that safety and protection of our young people is really how we as a society and working with child welfare and you all out there who are giving endless amounts of time and energy to children in need. We all have that mission in mind, and we do want to provide safety to them, but also we are working to protect the youth in our care. I want to thank all of you for listening to this presentation, but I also want to just really reinforce from the Department of Human Services the amount of energy that goes into working with foster care, and I express my sincere appreciation, and I can hope that I can meet some of you and see many of you as years and things go on. But this is a great platform that we have this presentation. I appreciate you tuning in, and I hope you all have a great rest of your day.